The police suddenly announced, "We've urgently transported a child found in the car. You are under arrest." Shocked by the unexpected arrival of the police at my home, couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What? I don't have a child," I responded in confusion. The officers seemed equally puzzled. They had identified the car's owner through the license plate, and it was indeed registered under my name. Could it be? Holding on to a suspicion, I rushed to the hospital where the child had been taken. There I saw a boy around 5 years old lying on an emergency bed. His face was red and rough, but my heart pounded wildly at the sight of his familiar face. From that moment on, my life changed dramatically with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old who works from home. I started dating my husband Michael in college since we were in the same club, and we married after graduation. Despite being married for 10 years, we couldn't have children. We even tried fertility treatments. I learned that I had a condition making it difficult to conceive. My kind-hearted husband, Michael, reassured me, saying, "It's okay, let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws are nice people, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never pressured me. However, I felt bad for my parents, who were looking forward to their grandchildren. Fortunately, since I lived near my parents, I made it a point to visit them frequently. I also have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. If only John had a child. Growing up, John was perhaps spoiled as the youngest child and started hanging out with bad influences around middle school. He claims it was because our parents compared him to me, the smarter and more accomplished older sister. From my perspective, our parents treated us equally. Regardless, John rebelled and caused a lot of trouble. At 20, he declared he was cutting ties with the family and left home, disappearing without a trace. Since then, I haven't seen him. Sometimes I browse old photo albums and reminisce. I'd often reminisce about the days when John, as a toddler, would toddle after me, calling me sis. One day, while working from home, my doorbell rang incessantly. Panicking, I checked the camera and saw the police standing there. The police suddenly announced, "We've urgently transported a child found in the car. You're under arrest." Shocked by this abrupt statement, I was at a loss for words. "What? I don't have a child," I replied, just as baffled as the officer. My mind was filled with questions. According to the police, a passerby noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside and reported it. The child was then transported by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked about the car's location, they said it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police had identified the car's owner from its license plate. While the car was indeed registered under my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John when he got his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car had been left in front of my parents' house, only moved when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt pity and took care of the vehicle's upkeep. Thinking that he might need it, I wondered who this child left behind in the car could be. Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from under a blanket. The curly, wavy hair instantly reminded me of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be? As I was pondering this, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away and sounded panicked. John called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home under this blazing sun. What should we do? I informed my worried and panicking mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive. She seemed relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings, that there was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's, but when was he born? And who is his mother? I explained to the police that the child was probably my brother's and decided to stay with the child. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but I couldn't get through to John. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain. It was heartbreaking to see such a small body enduring so much suffering. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child was wearing after changing him into hospital pajamas. They were ragged and severely dirty, with the name Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was easy to imagine that Tom had been raised in a miserable environment. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. "John," she murmured, hugging Tom with tears flowing. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he still seemed very scared. I gently asked him, trying not to frighten him, "How old are you, Tom?" 5 years old, he answered, spreading out one hand and adding his fingers. "Wow, you speak so clearly." I praised him, stroking his head. He smiled for the first time, but he still seemed thin, pale, and small. According to the doctor, there were bruises all over his body. I persuaded the police to let us take responsibility for the child until we could contact John, and we somehow avoided a report being made. 3 days later, Tom was discharged. I didn't want to dress him in his tattered clothes, so I bought new ones and had him changed into them. He looked even more intelligent and cute in them. Finally, as we were leaving the hospital, I got through to John, but there was tremendous noise on the other end of the call. "How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun?" "He was taken to the hospital," I exclaimed. "He survived, didn't he? So it's fine," John replied nonchalantly. "He had bruises all over his body." "Did you do this?" "Thomas is clumsy. I was just disciplining him," John retorted without a hint of remorse. "He's only 5 years old. He's just a child," I said, my voice shaking. "He can't even remember the letters no matter how many times I tell him. It's annoying. So I thought I'd leave him at our parents' house," John continued, shocking me with his harsh words. "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," he added, before hanging up the phone. Seeing my distress, Tom looked worried and began to shed silent tears. "It's going to be okay," I said softly, stroking his head. He was only 5, a time to be selfish and cry. But he didn't. It felt odd that he never called for his daddy or mommy. Imagining the reason made my heart ache. After discussing with Michael and my parents, we decided to look after Tom in our home. I made a kid's lunch with hamburgers and fries, decorated with character flags. When I placed it in front of Tom, his eyes sparkled. "I've never seen anything like this. Can I really eat it?" he asked. "Of course, I made it for you," I replied. I loved the way he ate it, with ketchup all over his mouth and a big smile on his face. In the evening, Tom played around in the bath with Michael, laughing and enjoying himself. At night, I would read him picture books while lying next to him. He listened intently with sparkling eyes, but would suddenly look at me with an anxious expression. "Can I stay here forever?" "Don't want to go back home anymore," he asked. "I get it. You want to stay here, right?" I said. Tom nodded with relief, and it was heart-wrenching to see him that way. As the days went by, he became even more attached to me and Michael. When I was folding laundry, Tom would come over and offer to help. When I went shopping, he tried to carry my bags with his little body. Living together, I realized he was a kind and wonderful child. Michael and I grew so fond of him that we started discussing adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I found that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth and that on the certificate of residence, The parents and Tom were listed as living at my parents' house. We started consultations at the family court about a month after we took in Tom. Then John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom." "Oh," John said. "I don't want to go back," Tom exclaimed, hurrying to hide behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences. After years without seeing him, my brother looked more aggressive, and his clothes were unkempt. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Risa, wore numerous piercings in her ears and nose and looked flashy, like a playgirl. "How did you know where I live?" I asked. I asked Mom. "By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh? I have something to discuss regarding Tom. Let me in." I didn't feel good about it, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around frequently, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had no place to stay. While looking around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. "I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so you probably can't have any, can you?" "What are you trying to say?" I asked. "We've got a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free." I was stunned by the audacity of him trying to sell his son for money after having tried to leave him with our parents because he was annoyed. I was burning with anger. "John, what do you think your child is? He's not an object." "What?" "Things so high and mighty." "I became rebellious because you're too serious. Our parents always sided with you. It's funny how you blame our parents and me for your own lack of success." "Shut up. Just give me the money," John demanded, enraged. John raised his hand to hit me, but at that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward and spread his arms to protect me from John. Seeing this, I became even more determined to protect Tom. Selling a child for money was unthinkable. However, I decided to give John and Risa the $13,400 I had saved as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would never get involved with Tom again and obtain their consent for the adoption. Risa remarked, "It's refreshing not to have to raise such a troublesome child," surprising me with her coldness. Once the procedures were completed, the two took the money, smirked, and disappeared. And so, Tom truly became our child, and we completed the necessary legal procedures. The following days were nothing but happiness. Tom grew up healthy, and we, as a couple, spent our days filled with smiles and joy thanks to him. During this time, we noticed Tom's talents and wanted to nurture them. However, another incident occurred 15 years later. Once again, my younger brother and his wife came to visit. John had grown a scruffy beard, his hair was messy, and he looked rather thin. Although he was only 41, he didn't look it. The woman also had no makeup and was wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was immediately apparent that they had fallen on hard times and were living a rough life. I had a bad feeling, as their visit couldn't mean anything good, and my reliable husband Michael was out at work that day. "What brings you here?" I asked. "I need some money," John replied. "Why should I give you any money?" I asked, surprised. I thought Tom was just a stupid brat, but he got into a prestigious university's medical department, didn't he? John said. It seemed he had met someone from our neighborhood in a local tavern and heard about Tom. In reality, Tom was very intelligent. He had been top of his class since elementary school and even got into a prestigious medical school straight out of high school. "That's no longer your concern, is it?" I said. "It's a big deal. He's my son, and since he's such an excellent son." "I thought I'd take him back," John said. "What?" I exclaimed in shock. John smirked and said, "If you don't like it, give me the money. How about you give me $33,500? John demanded. "Sister, didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" "That's a different story. I can't give you that money," I said firmly. When I refused, John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. I felt more pain in my heart than in my body, looking at my thoroughly rotten brother. At that moment, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, who had grown into a sturdy 20-year-old. John was easily subdued and ended up lying face down on the floor. John's wife, seeing the grown-up Tom, said sweetly, "You've grown up. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom firmly declared, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the horrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I experienced love the first time when I came to this house. You are not my parents." Even after hearing Tom's words, the two didn't seem to give up. So I showed them the agreement we made 15 years ago. The agreement stated, we will have no future involvement with the child. If we do not comply, we will be sued. You've broken your promise. I'm calling the police, I said. They were visibly shaken, making excuses that they had completely forgotten about it. Actually, we are being pursued by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in deep trouble. So don't be so cold. Help me out, sister. You are rich, aren't you? John pleaded, his earlier threats now turned into begging. I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you severed ties with me too. I have no brother anymore, I replied coldly. Please, he pleaded. But I coldly rejected him. Helping him now would only encourage him to continue his behavior. As I was about to call the police due to their insistence, they reluctantly left. Later on, heard that the couple had been caught shoplifting and seemed to be in jail, leading a miserable life. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, Anna continued to live a peaceful and happy life. Seeing Tom, who wants to become a doctor to help those suffering from illnesses, makes me really happy. Thinking about it, we were able to live every day with laughter thanks to Tom. We hope to continue living happily together.